The purpose of this video is to read some Japanese folk tales. So this book is compiled by Norikazu Muramaru. First printing July 1992, it's copyrighted 1992. The cover illustration is Tatsuo Isoya, and the text is Kasama Seisaku Shitsu. Seisaku Shitsu. It's published by Yohan Publications Incorporated, 14-9 Okubo 3 Chome, Shinjuku-ku, Tokyo, Japan. Shinjuku is a big station on the south side of Tokyo, and Okubo is maybe about 3 stops to the west. The first time I went to mainland Japan in the Marine Corps. I stayed in a place called Okubo House. It's probably gone now. It was a great place to stay. Lots of travelers from around the world traveling on the cheap, and also different Japanese men who were, not homeless, but very low income, would stay there also. They stayed on the lower floor, and they were in like bunk beds, but it was just wood and a mattress maybe about that thick. Not very much amenities to it, but it was a good cheap place to stay. So I'd go into Tokyo every weekend, and after the first weekend, everybody else in the barracks was saying, "Oh, I don't have any money to go to Brokyo next week." So I stayed at a good place. So the first story in this is The Fountain of Youth. So, The Fountain of Youth. In the West, there are many tales about the Fountain of Everlasting Youth, such as Ponce de Leon and Fernando de Soto searching for the fountain several hundred years ago to keep people young and gay in paradise. Here in this country, Japan, there are similar stories from olden times. This is one of the many folk tales told and retold among the people in the western part of the province of Totomi in what is now Shizuoka Prefecture. Prefectures in Japan are like states, and they have a lot of people in Japan, so it's got a population probably about the size of a small state. So, once upon a time, there was an old man with fluffy gray hair living peaceably with his wife in a lonesome village by the mountains. The old man usually went into the mountains to gather firewood to make their living. One day, early in the morning, he went to work in the nearby mountains while his old wife stayed at home to do the daily housekeeping. After a time, evening approached, and when he usually came home with a bundle of firewood on his back, but that day he didn't come home. The old woman was a bit worried to think what might have happened to her aged husband in the mountains. However, there was nothing she could do, as they were living all alone apart from the rest of the villagers. As she was deep in thought, imagining what could have happened to the old man, she heard a rustling noise outside. She hurried out of the house to see what might be the noise, and there she saw a dark, shadowy figure coming toward her. When she perceived the outline of a man carrying a bundle of wood on his back, she was very relieved, and she began to walk to meet the dark figure. As she came near, she strained her eyes and peered closely into his face. "Why, it's you. But what made you come so late? Now hurry, it's cold out here. Come, come." So she dragged her reluctant husband into the house. And when they were inside the house, she cried out in astonishment, What? Is this you? Why have you dyed your hair so black to make you look so young? I can't believe you. Oh, I can't believe you. And then she began to weep even more sorrowfully. Now listen, dear. You must believe me, said the man. Then he told her that he went into the mountains and began to gather firewood as usual. He felt thirsty, but there was no water nearby. So he climbed up a beautiful mountain and came down to the foot of it on the other side, where he found a refreshing spring. And there he quenched his thirst. But when I took a drink, it was like sake, rice wine. So I took several more drinks, and then I began to feel sleepy and slept into the night. And when I awoke, I felt so fresh and strong. I guess it's the spring water that made me so young. While the old man turned young man was relating his story, the old woman listened very carefully, with much curiosity. Then she said cheerfully, "Why, if that is the case, I must go there tomorrow to drink the water, because I too want to become young." Yes, you better go, because it's no good for me to be the only one becoming young." So the next morning, the old woman went into the mountains, as told by her young husband, to look for the spring that could make her young. The man, of course, stayed at home to look after the house for her. Evening came, but she didn't come home either. This time the man began to worry, and he stayed awake throughout the night waiting for her to return. But she didn't come home, even after the sun had risen. Therefore, he decided to go into the mountains to look for her. He clearly recalled the path to the wonderful spring, so he reached it easily. There he expected to find her, but she was nowhere to be found. Then, while looking around the clear spring, he suddenly heard a faint muttering noise nearby. He carefully followed the noise, and when he reached the spot, he saw a baby wrapped in a big kimono, wriggling and about to cry. "Is it you, dear?" asked the man softly, but sharply bewildered, recognizing the kimono the old woman had worn the day before when she went into the mountains. To this, the baby nodded slightly and muttered feebly, "The water of the spring was so sweet that I drank too much of it. And see what has become of me." And that's the end of the story.